Hello, everyone, and welcome to the inaugural episode, I guess, of Apologetic Apoplectics. This is a show that Paul and I have determined we would like to do together. And it is born of us having myriad conversations about apologetics and videos that we've watched and apologetics that we have encountered, and kind of wanting to take it to the public for a couple of different reasons. One of the reasons is that we believe that there is a distinct lack of showing source methodology and showing what it is like to question what you are seeing and what that actual process looks like, what those discussions look like. So this show is going to be slightly different than most of the shows that you're used to watching. Predominantly, when you're watching counter apologetics in the atheist community or the secular community, you're usually watching the end result of somebody going through the discovery process or source methodology and giving you what they have uncovered. Instead, we wanted to demonstrate what it's like to have those conversations and to do that research kind of in real time. So what we've decided to do is we select a video each episode, and we both watch them separately, and we don't discuss the videos, which was exceptionally hard for me predominantly because I like to speak immediately about the things that I think. So I've been actively avoiding Paul to not have discussions about this particular video. And then we kind of come together with all of you wonderful people, and we have the discussion in real time, the way that we would have it in our real lives. So we're not coming to any real serious determinations about where we stand. It's mostly the process of questioning what that question asking looks like, how we do source methodology, how we have these types of discussion in order to be able to model it, and also to engage with you, to kind of give you homework to go and look where we looked or look elsewhere and share in the comments section, what you think, where you looked, what you found, how you can trust it, so that we can all build a better epistemology together as we go through the process of questioning the things that are placed in front of us in this increasingly difficult to traverse, truth-averse media landscape. So welcome, and we're excited to go on this journey with you. And welcome to my co-host, Paul from Apologia. Paul, say hello to the people.
Hello to all the people, and one logistical note, I'm saying hello to all the people watching from Shannon Q's YouTube channel. I'm also saying hello to the people watching from the Apologia Live YouTube channel. Welcome to you both. This episode will be on both channels. We are uncertain as to whether or where this will land. So if you are watching Apologia Live, make sure at some point you go to Shannon Q web channel and subscribe there, so that we don't know how this is all going to end up, but subscribe to both channels so that you know where in the future, if indeed there warrants future, where we
I think I would still like to do it irregardless. And part of this, I think, is possibly Paul wanting to encourage me to be more of a content creator. Again, which is something that I want to do, but I want to find a niche that makes sense for me. And I think this is one. I've often thought, well, you and I are like sitting in the car listening to, because we're those people sitting in the car listening to apologist podcasts and videos, having these discussions, consistently pausing. Like if somebody could be a fly on the wall right now, it would be interesting. It would be interesting to hear what other people think about how we have these discussions, and what we do with them, what these questions look like, and where they come from. And Paul and I both have very different backgrounds, both in our previous religious life and just in general. Paul tends to focus significantly more on the textual criticism and theological aspects of apologetics. And I tend to focus a bit more on rhetorical strategies and like doing like serious work around like philosophy and psychology. So we have different strengths, and iron sharpens iron. So I think we've both helped each other as we go through this journey, and hopefully having these conversations will help you guys as well. So we won't prattle on and on and on about the concept of the show. We should probably just begin. Paul, do you want to introduce the video that we've selected? This is the one that I sent you because I knew it would agitate you.
Indeed, this particular video was a compilation video posted to Kirk Cameron's Takeaways channel. He has a TV show, and it doesn't air in Canada. It airs on TBN or something like that in the States. But this was a compilation episode that was taking best of that's
greatest hits.
Using the greatest, that's using the terms maybe too generously, but it took some similarly themed questions from several people that if you watch my channel at least, you're going to recognize all of these faces, and it's themed around extra biblical evidence for the resurrection of Jesus. At least that's what the title says that it was about. I didn't find that was what it was actually about, but we'll see.
Yeah, I'm interested to see where we coalesce and where we diverge, because I think that the things that annoyed me may have gone past you, and the things that annoyed you may have not been as annoying for me. So
indeed,
I will yell pause. From this point on, Paul and I are essentially just having an organic conversation. However that pans out. And we encourage you, both live and if you're viewing us after, if there's anything that comes up from this, or there's any suggestions that you have about another video for us to consume, please put it in the chat and in the comments.
It's not too long a video, but it may take a while because Shannon and I both have pause buttons, and we both can trigger the thing. So I know
we both get apoplectic quite rapidly. Hence the name of the show. Which I can't believe no one else ever thought of, to be fair. Apologetic Apoplectics is such an apt name for what we're about to do.
All right, let's watch at least 5 seconds here.
Okay.
If Jesus is not the Messiah, there will never be a Messiah.
Okay.
That's as far as I can get. I'm good with that. First of all, I agree.
Why?
Second of all, well,
why? Why does it have to be Jesus though?
Oh, because there's prophecies that are and the way Christians interpret the Hebrew Bible interpretations, there's prophecies that basically say that the Messiah will enter the temple, the second temple, and the second temple was destroyed in 70 AD. It's gone now.
Right.
So no person now could be the Messiah,
or after 70 AD.
Basically after 70 AD, no one could fulfill that prophecy.
But why does that disclude other people who were contemporary to or prior to Jesus? Like, why? That I don't understand. That doesn't make any sense to me. Because he's saying if Jesus is the Messiah, the Messiah, then nobody can be the Messiah. So
well,
there was lots of other somebodies. They were like rife with apocalyptic preachers.
Sure, but he's leaning on understanding that none of those fulfilled the myriad of prophecies that would also need to be, like that. Jesus is the only candidate
that we're aware of
that at least fulfilled a bunch of them.
Well, that's a selection bias though, because he's the only candidate that we have anything written about. That doesn't mean that, like, because I would argue that a lot of people might say that, especially now that I've started rereading a lot of the New Testament since we started doing this. Like I started rereading Acts and rereading, I was reading the letters to Corinth the other day, and it's so abundantly clear, like very, very, very clear that a lot of people were following John the Baptist at that time. Like there was just like a lot of chatter about John the Baptist that they felt like they had to overcome within the churches they were establishing to push people towards Jesus instead of John the Baptist. So I don't know. It may seem pedantic, but I think that that's an overextension. Him saying, if it's not Jesus, nobody can. I think a better statement would be because of this, which he's not specific about either. Like this is all predicated on the fact that you happen to know about this prophecy because of the special interest that you have and the fact that you go into this so much. And so you know when the temple was destroyed, but the average person wouldn't necessarily know that, and he doesn't qualify the statement, which is an annoyance with me with Lee Strobel.
In one bit, to be fair, I have seen, unfortunately, most of these episodes in full, not the clips that they've come from.
Oh, yeah, that's right. You're nuts. I forgot you hate yourself.
And so, to be fair to, and I hate to be fair to Lee Strobel. That was one of my least favorite things. But to be fair to Lee Strobel, in that full episode that he is in, he does explain why. In this clip, it is left out entirely. Yes, you need to have the alternate background knowledge. But also, I think it's hilarious that that's an argument that somehow I see apologists think that they're making a point. Well, there can't. If it's not Jesus, who is the Messiah then? And I'm like, every non-believer is like, nobody. There's nobody. Nobody's
yeah.
Like,
it
and
just
like,
begs the question that there must be.
Like as if that there's gonna, as if that'll have to happen. Like, no, we don't. We don't think those are going to be fulfilled anytime. Anyway.
All right, fair enough. So you co-sign that if Jesus isn't the Messiah, nobody is.
Nobody will be. Yeah.
Nobody will be. Nobody will be.
That was what his phrase was. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm going out on a limb. No one will be the Messiah. Yeah.
Unless you negate the prophecy.
Nobody can go back and fulfill things that needed to be fulfilled before the destruction of the temple in 70 AD.
There you go.
Isn't it true that it's not only in the Bible that we read about Jesus living, dying, being buried, and being seen after?
You're going to pause so much more than me. Wait till we get to Wallace.
It's just important that we remember the list of things that Kirk is asking about. He says, isn't it true that there's sources outside the Bible to talk about Jesus existing, dying, being buried, and being seen?
All right, so I'm not making an Excel spreadsheet right now.
Yeah.
So
those are the
dying,
being buried,
being buried,
and being seen post-resurrection, post-resurrection sightings.
All right, so existing.
That's what he's gonna ask Sean. Let's have a fun game to see if Sean answers any of those questions.
Yeah, the rhetorical strategy here is what annoyed me. We'll get into it.
He died, but that's also attested to by non-Christian contemporary historians during that time.
So some of those facts, yes. Now, I know you're not implying this, but when skeptics say to me, well, what about outside the Bible? There's kind of an assumption that we can't trust the Bible.
We're going to pause so much. This is what annoyed me, because he's making a rhetorical preface right now. And he's going to go on to do it more. First off, he's using a rhetorical strategy where he's like appealing to what skeptics say. So that gives him this illusion of like countering what people say by making a generalization about what people he sees as an opponent says in order to then counter it. And then he's going to kind of follow on with the thing that kind of annoyed me the most.
I'm telling you, Kirk, if we had none of these other sources, I still think we can trust the accounts in Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John and other early Christian historians to have confidence that it's true.
Yes, so do I.
So another thing is other early Christian historians are sources outside the Bible. But it seems to me, and I'm not sure if you'll agree with me on this or not, Paul, that he is essentially saying, or appealing to, maybe more so than saying, well, you don't need to worry about it because the Bible itself is true. But this is something that we need to say to skeptics, because skeptics just don't believe the Bible. And that, like, J. Warner Wallace does this later too, and it really annoys me. But we could just take the Bible and that would be fine, because a Christian, like if you're like a really Bible believing Christian, those external sources don't really matter anyway to you. So he needs to make sure that he's prefacing it so that they don't get upset with him. Am I wrong about that? I mean, I could be, or do you perceive me as being wrong about that?
I think you're correct. So what I observed when I watched this video was that Sean is the only person featured on this show who has a current scholarly career to protect.
Fair.
So he cannot come on like Lee Strobel will do and straight up say things that are not correct.
Anti-werewolf.
Right,
Yeah.
because Sean legitimately is a scholar, not a scholar, but a professor at a college.
Yeah.
So he can't come on. So he knows that the nuanced answer to what Kirk said is no. Like, if someone goes and looks these up, they're going to say no. So I feel like Sean is the only one who even attempts to nuance his positions so that when someone, if and when someone after the fact was to check him out, he gave himself
An escape hatch.
An escape hatch. Yeah. So the first thing he said to Kirk was, well, some of those are right. He will never come back to delineate.
Yes, he never cycles back to it.
No.
Never.
Some of those are correct. Oh, yeah, okay.
But anyway, we can trust the Bible. Don't worry.
Yeah. But don't worry. And that's the placation, right, for the Christians is even if some go on the TikTok and you see a Dan McClellan telling you that these are all garbage, don't worry about it. The Bible's still good enough, right? So
okay, cool. So we'll play it again, and just to recap, we're looking for sources outside the Bible that prove Jesus existed, died, was buried, and was seen. Those four things.
Correct.
Outside the Bible.
Outside the Bible.
All right, let's see if we get there.
With that said, when we go outside of the scriptures, you have writers like Josephus at the end of the 1st century that affirm the existence of Jesus.
And who's Josephus?
Josephus was a Jewish writer writing on behalf of the Romans in the 90s.
Not a Christian.
He was not a Christian, no. And so he gives basic facts. Jesus, the brother of James, Jesus lived, he was died. There's reports that he's the Messiah. He doesn't give all the details, but he tells details that help support and corroborate the accounts within the Gospels. You get in
Okay, so for existing, we have Josephus.
Yep.
In the 90s. In the spreadsheet that I'm definitely not making because I like to keep track of things visually. I need a whiteboard. That's what I really need. We talked about this.
Yeah, that's right.
I need a whiteboard.
Right there. Exactly.
Behind me so that I can make my chart. So this, based on what I've read, I would have Josephus definitely mentions Jesus' existence, so far as I'm aware, based on things that I've read previously, looking it up.
Yeah, so there's two passages in Josephus.
Let's bring them up. What are they?
Well, Josephus, they're in the Antiquities of the Jews.
About Jesus. I'm just typing it in. Josephus passages about Jesus. So Josephus, where does it say what it's in Antiquities of the Jews?
Mm-hmm. I'm hoping when I remove the video that it doesn't lose my spot. So I'm going to check this.
Yeah. So, are you sharing mine now? Okay.
Yeah.
So in 63, now there was about this time Jesus, a wise man, if it be lawful to call him a man, for he was a doer of wonderful works, a teacher of such men as received the truth with pleasure. He drew over to him both many of the Jews and many of the Gentiles. Okay, so wasn't Josephus a Jewish writer?
Yeah.
So wouldn't it be? So he wrote that a Jew was writing this about Jesus. Okay, no. I didn't think so. That sounds weird.
So here's the thing.
Okay.
All scholars, except there's a new book by a gentleman named Schmid, and I can't think of his first name off the top of my head. This is widely considered an interpolation / forgery in Josephus, because you recognized immediately what. So Flavian Josephus, you recognized immediately what pretty much all scholars recognize, and that is that no Jewish person would write, if indeed he could be called a man. And then so the debate is entirely about how much, if any, of that passage is legitimate. I think none of it is legitimate because if you take the full text of the chapter that it's in and you pluck that section out, it reads naturally without that section in there at all. Other scholars want to say that, okay, well, it talked about some of the nice things, but didn't, call him the Messiah. But there is another passage in Josephus where he talks about the death of James, the brother of Jesus.
Yeah. Okay.
And in that, I believe that passage is legit. It because it says nothing at all about Jesus except that he had a brother James.
Okay.
And so I will go ahead and say, Sean, sure, Josephus it gives us some evidence that Jesus existed. It was a live human who existed because he had a brother. Whether it be a mythicist will say it's a spiritual brother, like a brother in Christ kind of a thing. But it doesn't matter. And Josephus is writing, thinks he was a real person. But that Flavium Josephus that you just looked at, where it has and he was considered a miracle worker, and that he died and he was crucified, none of those things. Most scholars, they say that was interpolation by Christians later on, literally specifically to answer the question that Kirk is concerned about, and that is, why didn't the most prominent Jewish scholar of the first century say anything about him? And so it looks like later Christians stuck that in there. So,
but how do we know that earlier Christians stuck that in there?
Well, there are other versions of the book that got translated to other languages, and it's my understanding that at least one of the other languages doesn't have that passage.
Oh, interesting.
That's
relatively early.
Yeah, who knows, right? It's why is that passage? Because you don't know from which source that got translated. But also, even most Christian scholars, like a Mike Licona or even Sean, if you push him on it, will be like, it sure looks forged. But it doesn't affirm, even if you're generously granting it, it affirms only two of the things that Kirk asked, right? It only affirms that he lived and died. Even if you keep the flowery version in,
right?
It doesn't say he was buried. It doesn't say that he was seen alive later. So,
okay. So I guess that's homework for anybody watching is and for me on my spreadsheet that I'm creating that I'll share at the end of Sean's thing. So far we have proof for existing is Josephus, but also in the Antiquities of the Jews, it seems to be that scholars think that that's an interpolation, which would make sense intuitively, because if this man was a Jewish historian, it would be very odd for him to be like, Jesus is a miracle worker and stuff. That it just seems strange. And the later translation thing is interesting to me as well. Okay.
Let's put
second century. You have writers like Tacitus, who's a Roman historian, and he also points to the existence of Pontius Pilate, the death of Jesus, the persecution of early Christians. You find these extra biblical.
So does Tacitus say anything about Jesus existing, dying, being buried, or being seen?
Yes. So Tacitus is a Roman historian. I kind of got lost there. I didn't know how much Sean said.
Not much before I got distracted.
So he was trying to do a brief for his governor about what this Christian nonsense that he's supposed to start. What's this Christian thing I'm hearing about? And so Tacitus writes a couple sentences basically saying there was this guy named Jesus and we put him to death, and his followers are nuts.
So really, he's just attesting that there's a group of people. So the evidence that Sean's pointing to is...
And Sean didn't overstate.
It's just that Tacitus mentions that Christians exist.
Yeah, and that they're troublesome and bothersome, and he calls them a superstition. He doesn't even call them a religion. They're a superstition.
Okay, so that seems to be kind of counter.
Well, I actually think that Tacitus is the best source because he seems to care not about their claims.
Right. Okay. So but all that does is just say that there was Christians, or am I wrong about that?
It's only Yes, it basically affirms that there were Christians and that someone who was potentially in a position to know who they killed said that we killed him.
Okay, so he was a Roman, says Romans. So this would be proof of the dying then. So this is what he's doing for the dying. Okay,
right.
So Tacitus.
So if you're talking to a mythicist, so when I used to debate mythicists before I had a YouTube channel,
right?
Tacitus was the one I always leaned on most heavy for Jesus existing. I have a whole different set of thoughts and arguments now, but they basically say, well, no, the fact that he said we murdered him doesn't mean that he had firsthand knowledge that we murdered him. He was just going by what the Christians, was going by what the Christians said, and we're just taking it at face value. Possible.
Right. I'm willing to accept that Jesus lived and died.
Yeah.
The being buried and being seen is the most interesting.
Yeah.
Aspect.
So far, nothing about being buried or being seen. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Hopefully that's next.
Sources. And by the way, there's not a ton of extra biblical sources on anything in that time period at that time. So the fact that they would even talk about Jesus, who's a religious leader in a small corner of the empire that didn't have any political power anyways, is significant.
I've read in your books like...
Okay, so we just never get to being buried and being seen.
That's correct. That flash cut means that that flash on the screen is what Kirk uses to say different clip now, which honestly, actually, as an editor, I actually respect. At least you're getting... I noticed that Jon Stewart did this. Just the other day, I noticed that when Jon Stewart is splicing a speech together of a politician, they put a little flash on there so that you know that they didn't say those sentences back to back. And I'm just kind of like, oh, that's kind of a nice, honest edit.
Yeah, no, that's fine. But I'm a little frustrated now because I made an entire chart and I only got to write. So the whole point of that conversation, that clip of a conversation between Kirk and Sean is that Josephus mentioned that Jesus existed and Tacitus mentioned that he died.
Yep. That's what we got.
But that's not even the most important parts, one would think, right?
Nope.
In a video about the resurrection.
And especially when Kirk is under the impression, Kirk asked about 4 things, and Sean seemed to, he was shining him on a bit. Some of those things, but I'm not going to specify which ones they're not there. So I guarantee Kirk walked away from that thinking, yeah,
nailed it.
There are post-resurrection appearances are affirmed by Romans and Jews.
Play devil's advocate, would they lump in being seen and being buried with the Josephus passages, interpolation or otherwise, saying that he was a teacher of men, and Tacitus saying that they believed or saying that they believed he was the Messiah? Would they loop that in together? That's just saying what people believe. That's not evidence. That's not extant evidence. You're
also extending past what Tacitus actually says. The Christians are a superstition, and they're troublesome. He doesn't say that he doesn't go into at all what they believe. He just says they're a superstitious lot and they're troublesome. And we killed their dude.
So what did I'm not entirely caring if this is interesting because I want to be intellectually honest. So what did Tacitus say about Christianity? Tacitus on Jesus. You're probably not going to be able to see that very well. I'll try to make it bigger. By Pontius Pilate. So he said Pontius Pilate existed and the existence of early Christians in Rome. Annals 116. Wow, that's fairly late.
Yep. 2nd century.
By Rome. One of the earliest non-Christian references to the origins of Christianity, the execution of Jesus. So if Christ is the origin of that name, 2nd. Okay. So this doesn't actually really say anything to
No, it affirms the death. You had
Like,
it
by my
exactly right
list.
before you looked
the
at
case for Christ and others,
Oh,
that
sorry.
it wasn't just
Sorry.
the biography.
I was trying to put this back up and I failed miserably. Sorry. What were you doing? You were saying I'm absolutely right. Please continue.
Yeah. Before you went looking, you were absolutely right that all Tacitus does, it affirms that the founder of Christianity was killed by Romans. That's all it really.
I don't know why they would, or maybe they don't. Maybe I'm just being too generous. Why they would think that that in any way means that there's verifiable evidence of his appearances. Because that, like, you could say the same thing about any other religion. Like, I could write, or a historian could write about Mormonism or Islam or the Buddha or whatever, about what other people believed, like what a group of people believes, but that's not attesting in any way to the accuracy or the proof that lies behind that belief. And especially if the historian himself is like, actually, I think they're a bit bonkers.
Yeah, so it's
I'm
not
not sure
much
why you hang your
different.
hat on that. It seems like
It's like you or I could stumble through someone. Hey, here's a religion, Mormons or JWs or Buddhists, and I could stumble through my non-believer understanding of what they believe. But that would serve no affirmation of anything. It would just be me giving my vague understanding. Yeah. And that's all Tacitus is doing. Yep.
So just to sum up Sean McDowell clip 1, just to make sure you and I aren't missing anything here. We have Josephus being evidence that Jesus existed, Tacitus being evidence that he died, and no evidence whatsoever for being buried and being seen. So
correct. So of the 4 questions, we got half of them.
I'm so glad I made this chart. I never regret making a chart. There's not an Excel spreadsheet in my life that I regret. And
we got more. We have more to come if you want. You have more opportunities coming.
Oh, it's still open. I'll make more sheets. Don't worry. There's not a moment in my life that I don't think an Excel spreadsheet would make a conversation better. I really do need the whiteboard, though, probably, so that other people can see what I'm doing. Okay, are you ready? Who's next? I actually don't remember. I feel like it might be Strobel.
I think it's Strobel.
Well, I'm sorry, everybody, especially Paul. I'm actually not sorry. I like watching you get angry. All right, let's go.
Biographies of Jesus written by his disciples and those inside the Bible, but accounts of Jesus' life written by those outside the Bible who were not fans of Christianity.
There are actually 110 facts about the life, teachings, miracles, death, and resurrection of Jesus in ancient sources outside the Bible, documented.
110?
Oh, give it 10 more seconds.
Okay.
By the historian Dr. Gary Habermas in his book, The Verdict of History.
You're a bestie. Is he counting that as one of the sources outside of the Bible? Is he counting like people that are alive today writing books?
No. So Gary Habermas wrote a book. Gary Habermas wrote a book before Case for Christ, and I the name of it is escaping me, but it outlined 110, I guess, facts. I skimmed it once about Jesus that were recorded outside the Bible, but this was a precursor book to, you may recall that when J. Warner Wallace put out his book, Person of Interest, I spent a month making that Star Wars video, right? Yes,
to reconstruct Star Wars with all the clips that were outside of Star Wars.
Basically, Gary Habermas was creating that version of a book in the 80s that was basically saying, look, even if all the Gospels were gone, we would be able to reconstruct all these facts about Jesus without referencing the Gospels. The trouble is, he used sources all the way up to the 5th century, and 95% of them were church fathers. Right. So these were.
That's not going to tell you shit. Those people already believe, and they're just writing down tradition.
Exactly. But he's just saying, well, yeah, but if the gospel suddenly went missing, which is this weird premise that, like, I don't know how that. Okay, the four canonical gospels went missing. We could still look up in, Origin, and Origin tells us about, a couple of these facts and a couple of these facts, and Gary hobbled together a bunch, and most of them are on the lines of that Jesus worked miracles, not specific miracles, or some quotes of Jesus and some various things. So this is incredibly unimpressive information that Lee is giving us here.
Well, it's also just evidence that Christians existed.
Yeah, and none of these sources are from. So he uses Josephus and Tacitus, but those are, as even Tacitus is 2nd century, right? So these were post-gospel. So a post-gospel work telling me about what's in the gospel, is no more exciting than, I don't know, than me describing now what happened on Daredevil this week. It's like, well,
it's like watching a review video for a TV show, and that's evidence everything in that TV show is true.
No.
How would this guy know if Daredevil wasn't actually real and running around Hell's Kitchen?
So, but I just had to cringe that his source for this was Gary Habermas.
Yeah, that checks out to me anyway. All right, cool. Let's continue.
And so he goes through all these. These are references to Jesus in documents that are not part of what we would consider to be Holy Scripture.
Now, notice the Kirk said I understand that this is of people who didn't even like Christianity, but everyone in Gary's sources were people who really liked Christianity.
That is very true. So far it's just Tacitus and arguably Josephus.
Yeah. So all those 110 miscellaneous facts about Jesus, they were all by people who thought Jesus was great.
So those are all people within the church. Okay. Well, that seems to merit mentioning, because he said even people. Is that a rhetorical strategy? Because I even missed it, because he says even people who I guess were averse to, were negative towards Christianity.
Yeah,
and if in those 110 you include just those two, then you're you still have that escape hatch, because that is even people, because you're not quantifying it. You're not saying there's these two sources that basically we can use to just affirm that Jesus existed and he died and people believed he was the Messiah, that are somewhat contemporary-ish adjacent. Tacitus is much later, and Josephus is
compared to the rest of the people they're using. Tacitus was quite early, because Gary went all the way up to the 5th century, right? So after Constantine, he was still including people.
Why though? I don't understand the methodology for that. Or is it just to pad your case? Is it just case padding?
No, so it's not an uninteresting exercise to do, much like my Star Wars recreation was not an uninteresting exercise to do. But it doesn't prove anything, right? It's more just, hey, what could we, hypothetically, if the Star Wars movies disappeared, how much of it could we make back? But it proves nothing about anything. So I don't disparage Gary for having done it. It's basically try to talk about how rich the church father writing was. But
that's just an exercise in theological reconstruction.
Yeah.
The construction of a belief system, not the ascertaining of the facts of the matter.
These are not, you're right. These are not independent attestation in any conceivable way. Any more than Family Guy was an independent attestation that Luke Skywalker rescued Princess Leia.
Then it's not appropriate to present in this context then, because he's presenting it in this context as though there's some kind of His whole video is about proving the resurrection, and I haven't heard a single fucking thing yet about.
Yeah, and this is on Lee, not on Gary. This
Fair
is
enough.
on Lee's,
I'm not saying
Strobel.
that.
Yeah,
but that's how he in this moment is representing.
That's correct. It's much like when look on my shelf right over here where all these 4,000 pages about the resurrection. See, covered. It's oh yeah, all right.
So it's just a little bit of dancing to distract from the fact that you don't really have an answer to the question then.
Yeah.
Okay, fair enough.
about the 9 ancient sources that confirm the conviction of the disciples that
9
they
sources.
really did
Yes.
see the risen Jesus.
Exactly. And it's important to understand most of what we believe about the ancient world is based on one source or 2 sources. So I'll ripple through those.
So these are, he says, 9 sources that confirm the resurrection or the risen Jesus.
Either way. Yeah.
It's very important that I label the top of this spreadsheet correctly so I don't get it confused. All right, I'm ready now. All right.
9 sources real quick. The creed that I mentioned in 1 Corinthians 15, that's so early.
So the creed.
The creed, 1 Corinthians 15, verses 3 to 8. Yep.
Okay. So the first is the creed and where it's found. This is what led me to read Corinthians, which is, I read Corinthians. I was talking to you about Corinthians the other day because I was reading it while we were sitting in the same room. And I was like, Paul's a dick. That guy's a tool.
The apostle, not me. When when you're talking about me, it was a different context.
All right, so the creed in 1 Corinthians, which is just, I'll bring it up just so that people can see what he's talking about.
Well, I have it. Hold on.
Oh, you have it? Okay, cool. You share it then. All right, so now, brothers and sisters, I want to remind you of the gospel I preached to you, which you received and on which you have taken your stand. By this gospel you are saved, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, okay, there we go. For what I received, I passed on to you as of first importance, that Christ died for our sins according to the scripture, that he was buried, that he was raised on the 3rd day according to the scriptures, and that he appeared to Cephas, which is Peter.
Indeed.
And then to the 12. After that, he appeared to more than 500 of the brothers and sisters at the same time, most of whom are still living, though some have fallen asleep. Then he appeared to James, then to all the apostles. And last of all, he appeared to me also as one abnormally born. And you're using the NIV.
Yes, that's what I memorized when I was.
Side thought, and I would
high
like
schooler.
your thoughts on this and other people's thoughts on this. When I was reading it, because I'm very fastidious and strange, I was trying to figure out what the best and most accurate translation of the Bible is, because there are so many, and the small differences in translations do very much impact like the context of what was actually attempting to be conveyed. So you use NIV because
I use NIV because it's what I memorized.
okay.
And so like that's how it sounds in my head.
Okay.
So although NIV is respected up until 2011, it was well respected. It was probably the most respected. In 2011, they started messing with pronouns, and people got upset.
Not surprising.
It's funny because it started changing literally. Some of the times the translation would be specifically male when the Hebrew was ambiguous.
Yeah. And
so the NIV started changing to non-ambiguous pronouns. And as soon as you mess with pronouns, the evangelicals get upset, right? It's a problem. Anyway,
I found it very difficult to find any sort of consensus on one. Like there's a New American Standard version that a lot of people seem to like. Some scholars use one version and some use another. And if you select from the top, there's just dozens of versions. And depending on what you respond, an apologist or somebody of a specific belief system, their version of the Bible might say something moderately different. And I don't know why people don't register that as a problem either, right? Like, if you're like, my version of the Bible, like,
one of the things I do all the time
so many
is
versions that change things.
I use this link here, the in all translation link.
Okay.
And then what it does is it puts it eventually on the screen. What's happening? Oh, there it goes. It
Okay.
actually literally gives the verse in like all of them, so you can compare.
Oh, that's cool. I'm going to start using that to see
yeah.
where differences
Yeah.
lie.
But the trouble is, so you can have different goals with your translation, and it depends on whether you agree with the goal, right? So is your goal to say word for word what the thing is?
Yeah.
So
not even
that
necessarily
means
word for word, but like as accurate to the spirit of what was intended.
But those are different things. Accurate to the spirit translates idioms into it. Like, so if there's an idiom from back then, do you translate the words of that idiom and let the English reader flounder?
No, you translate the idiom in words, and then you add like a footnote or something that explains how that idiom was utilized.
Well, everyone,
in so much as you know that.
Every translation project has their own opinion, right, about how to do that, and that's why it's really tough. I've never heard anyone ever come out and say this is the best, just bar none. What everyone says, well, if your goal is X, then this is the best. If your goal is Y, this is the best. Like, so some of them are more faithful to the Greek and Hebrew. Some of them are more clear on meaning.
Right.
So your mileage may vary. ESV is very popular.
And the NIV is pretty popular.
NIV is pretty popular. Yeah.
Okay, fair enough. I know that was a side quest, and that really, so we're just at one of 9 sources.
If the goal of the show is to demonstrate how Shannon and I talk through things, that's what you're seeing.
Yeah, I have a lot of questions, and some of them are very, very frustrating, but it comes from a place of really wanting to actually understand, like not just affirm the thing that I believe, but really discern what the truth is. And one of the questions I came across is like, why am I using this translation? Does it change if I use the other translation? Like, does the spirit of it change? And then I rabbit holed for quite some time. So first of the 9 is the Creed in 1 Corinthians
15. So it's like, it's 3 to 7. So it's 4 verses in 1 Corinthians.
Right. Okay. Fair enough. So source 1 is Bible. Is what Paul relays to the Church of Corinth about a creed that he heard.
And that's,
that's the...
I'm just saying, and it's in 1 Corinthians 15. So let's see what his second one is.
Okay. All right. So we're 1 of 9.
First source. The second source is the Apostle Paul, who got to know some of the disciples, Peter, James, and John.
That's the same source.
He's literally going to cite 1 Corinthians 15, verse 7.
Paul wrote
the next
Corinthians.
Or verse 11. Yes, he did. Yeah, he did. Yeah.
I'm not adding a second one. I'm just changing the creed to the creed / Paul.
So
because you can't just that's annoying. I don't know why I didn't pick up on that the first time. Probably because I was busy reading Corinthians and trying to figure out which version of the Bible was the most accurate. But that's just the same, right?
Well, so the nuance would be Paul is claiming that verses 4 to 7 he got from someone else.
So he got the creed from someone else. He didn't make up the creed.
No, that's why Lee is separating them. So there's what the creed says, and then there's what Paul says, even though they are adjacent to each other. So he's saying those are 2 sources.
But it's in the same group of letters.
It's not only the same. It's in the same chapter. It's in the same chapter. It's going to be verse 11 that he's going to refer to.
Like,
and we just read
group of letters.
We read
where
3.
He's like, stop marrying your stepmothers, you fucking assholes.
No, not marrying. You're just hooking up with your.
Stop sleeping with your stepmother after your dad dies. And would you guys stop eating burnt offerings to other gods? Okay, and I'm so glad I didn't baptize any of you assholes. That was my favorite part of Christ. I'm so glad I didn't baptize any of you motherfuckers, except for this guy and his family. Because it's okay. So I'm not adding that as a second.
So we have the creed is written by Paul in 1 Corinthians 15. That's one. Second is the verses that Paul put around where he quoted the creed in Corinthians 15.
So I'm just
Yep.
writing 1 Corinthians.
And he says in 1 Corinthians, whether it's I or they, we're saying the same thing. Jesus rose from the dead. So he's
That's literally
confirming
verse
that the
11.
disciples encountered the resurrected Jesus. Third source is the book of Acts, that even atheist scholars
Oh my. Okay. All right. Shut up, Shannon.
will admit contains the summaries of teachings of the early church. And what's the teaching of the early church? The resurrection.
So third
I'm not
also
writing that down either because that's not a good or
It's a
reliable story.
there's a couple of problems with it. One, of course, he is going to use Luke, and so Luke wrote both Acts, and the same author wrote Luke and Acts. Lee will say that. So are those two separate sources? No, they're not. It's like saying Dune and Dune 2 are separate sources. It's like, are they? I don't know.
And they're all still within the Bible. And like,
Yeah, of course.
so to do this, I reread the back end of Acts, like the Paul portion of Acts.
Yep.
And Acts is wild, man. Like it's Paul's excellent adventures. Like that man goes to an island because even though he told his captors not to steer the ship into a storm, they did it anyway. And then for some reason, the Romans that had him captive, because he was a prisoner at the time being transported to Rome, he points to them and he's like, you guys can't leave this boat and go on a lifeboat. And they're like, all right, man, I get it. Cool. We won't then. We'll listen to you. Because I guess he was wandering around giving orders to people. So then they end up on an island. And the indigenous people on the island are nice to them. And they're like, come by our fire. And then a snake comes out of the fire and bites Paul. And the indigenous people are like, holy shit, you're going to die. That's a poisonous snake. And he's just like, no, I'm not. And he doesn't. And they're like, you're magic. So he goes and heals the fucking father of the king of the island. And then heals, I shit you not, everyone on the island. And then the people on the island are like, ooh, Magic Paul, we love you. So they give him a boat and he gets on the boat with his Roman captors to go to Rome, where he's supposed to be put in prison. I don't know what happens to any of the other prisoners, but also the Roman captors, I don't know if they just went with Paul. Like, how did he convince the other prisoners to get back on this fucking boat that they gave him? Why did he get on the boat if he knew he was going to be imprisoned? Because he's supposed to be preaching to people to save them. Why would he go get himself imprisoned? And he doesn't even get imprisoned. He goes to an island to visit some people, then goes to Rome. And then he goes to different people's houses. And I guess the entire time the guards are like, all right, let's go visit your friends, until eventually they give him an apartment to live in. And the end of Acts is like, and then everybody left him alone. And there was always a guard there. And people came to see him all the time. And he preached the word of God. The end. He doesn't even die. He just lives in his apartment with a Roman guard who went on a magical journey to an island with him where he healed everybody. Then they gave him a boat where he made himself prisoner again, and I guess left the rest of the prisoners. Then went on a journey and then lives in an apartment where the Roman guard is just waving people in to be like, come see Paul. He also goes to the Jews in Rome and is like, come gather round, everyone who is Jewish. I wish to tell you about Jesus. And all the Jews are like, we just had people come back from Judea and no one's ever heard of you. Carry on. So they're not persecuting him. The Romans aren't persecuting him because they're just standing outside his apartment, waving people in to talk to him about Jesus. And then nothing happens to him. It's just the end, happily ever after. Anyway, so I don't consider that a source. I think that that's crazy. Crazy.
So what Lee said there was, even skeptics will agree that Acts contains summaries of what Christians believed. And
Yeah, who gives a shit?
Yeah, we do agree that Acts contains summaries of what Christians believe. Yes.
So far I have creed written down. That's it.
All right, fair enough. Oh, we gotta get the...
Peter gets up in the same city where Jesus had been executed just a few weeks later and says, "Men of Israel, listen to these words. This Jesus, a man attested to you by miracles and wonders and signs, which he did in your midst." You know that he did. He's appealing to their common knowledge. And then he says, this Jesus God raised from the dead.
Very few of the miracles happened in Jerusalem, by the way. Just they were mostly in Galilee and the outside towns. But
Dead, to which
the one he killed the fig tree though in town. Everyone should remember that. Hey, remember when he came and he killed one of our figs? Yeah,
that time that
we're
fig
all
tree pissed him off.
witnesses. And how did they react? They said, "We know you're telling us the truth. What do we do?" And they repented, and the church was born. So there's Peter confirming. The next four.
This notion that Peter gave a sermon, allegedly gave a sermon. I don't believe any of Acts is reliable in any way. Doesn't tell us, again, doesn't affirm anything. As you said, you already pre-dismissed this.
Well, I mean, the thing about Acts that made the least sense to me, which one? I'm going to look it up. So, because this is my point, is that a lot of Acts is inconsistent because Paul didn't write Acts, Peter didn't write Acts. So they say that Luke wrote Acts, right? Like that's
Luke,
the assumption. Or the
companion.
same author that wrote like Luke,
same author
the
that
Gospel
wrote
of Luke.
What we call Luke. Yeah.
So Paul is in prison and he's preaching to a king. Acts 26, 27.
Agrippa.
Yeah. So this is why, logically, the narrative doesn't make sense to me when it comes to Acts. And people, I'm sure, will correct me if I'm wrong. So in Acts 26, 27, I want to actually bring it up, not the AI. I want to bring it up. Oh, you've got it up on the screen. Okay, perfect. Cool. Can you make it slightly bigger?
It's yours. You have to.
Oh, it's mine. Oh, okay. I'll make it slightly bigger then. All right.
Yeah.
So.
And actually, if you make your window taller, it would.
I don't know how to do that without.
You don't have to do it.
This is.
Yep, you're good.
So then Agrippa said to Paul, "You have permission to speak for yourself." So in the context here, Paul and his companions are all being held prisoner, and Agrippa comes and says to Paul that you could or says to whoever is there, that the magistrate or whatever, the person who's holding him, I want to see this Paul fella, bring him out. Doesn't say anybody else is brought out. And then Paul preaches his conversion story and yada, yada, yada. And this is just before he sails to Rome. Oh, it's Festus. Festus is the other one. I think that's... So the king rose, and with him the governor and Bernice and those sitting with them. After they left the room, they're gone. They're not in the room with Paul, and I don't think that there's any other prisoners or travel companions that are taking off out of the room to hear this private conversation between Agrippa, who is the king, and Festus, who is the person that is imprisoning Paul. But this is relayed. So the king rose, and with him the governor and Bernice, those sitting with them. After they left the room, they began saying to one another, "This man," after they left the room, "this man is not doing anything that deserves death or imprisonment." And Agrippa said to Festus, "This man could have been set free if he had not appealed to Caesar." So Paul insisted on speaking to Caesar. And that's why he wasn't set free, is what you're supposed, he wanted to preach to the highest person. He never does anywhere in the Bible at all. At the end of Acts, he's just living in an apartment with Romans guarding him, waving people in to talk to him about Jesus. And also, if you're taking this on authority, that's a narrative hole, because nobody could have been outside of the room to hear what these two were saying to each other, or any of that group were saying to each other. They left the room.
Well, that's so all of Luke and Acts is all allegedly, this physician Luke gathering information from sources, right? Like, so he opens up Luke by saying, in my former book, no, that's this Acts.
This is Acts.
Yeah. But in Luke, he starts off talking about how, hey, I wanted to write an orderly account because all the other accounts suck and mine's going to be great. And some eyewitnesses told people about these stories and I'm writing them down now. So the whole conceit is that even if Luke wrote Luke and Acts, he was not present for 90% of what he's writing. It's just the wee passages. No, I'm agreeing. I'm just saying a normal Christian is going to say, yeah, Luke had to find a source for like 90% of what he wrote. So that isn't going to be the straw necessarily that broke the camel's back, because Paul was theoretically there and Luke and Paul were besties. So Paul would.
But in the context of this apologetic, I don't think it's that nuanced, because what Lee Strobel is saying, like, he is saying that in Acts, this is sources that confirm the risen Jesus. And there's things that are said in Acts, but those things are hearsay.
They are hearsay. They're 1,000,000% hearsay, because Luke is not an eyewitness to any. He never met Jesus. Luke never saw Jesus risen or otherwise. Yeah. Hearsay all.
And so there's no firsthand account. This is just a compilation of the adventures of Peter and Paul. Yep. As people understood them,
or as he made them up. Yeah,
right. Or as like whatever. But you can't say that it's a first-hand account, which is kind of what you're hanging your hat on if you're saying that this is like,
yes, I would agree, confirmation
of the risen Jesus.
Yes,
like people go back into the ambiguity because they want to be able to say, oh, like I'm just saying that, like, that's a contemporary source that mentions it. So obviously that's what people believed, and fine. Like, I'll agree with you that people believed.
What we've got so far is we've got Paul. We got something that people told Paul. We got Paul, and then we got the things that Paul told his friend. Are the three sources we have so far. If you're taking them most charitably, that's what you've got.
Okay. All right. Well, back we go then. Are you ready?
Yeah, I'm ready.
Okay.
Oh, we gotta get
sources are Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, the four Gospels. There are 9 appearances in those 4 Gospels of the risen Jesus, and there's a lot of good reasons to believe that those Gospels contain the truth about what Jesus' life, teachings, miracles, death, and resurrection. But then we have 2 sources outside.
So, sources 4, 5, 6, and 7 are Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. None of which are independent from each other. Well, no, Mark is independent. Mark wrote his thing in a vacuum from the others.
They'll get into that later.
But
Sean will.
Anyway, but it's just fun. Those are not 4 independent sources, even again at most generous, because Mark Goodacre and other people have written a lot of great scholarship now about how John was every bit as independent as Mark as the others were.
You mean dependent on Mark?
Dependent on Mark, okay. Literally, you had Mark open when they wrote. So, yeah.
Okay, I'm not writing it down then. So far we have
enough.
Paul and the Creed. We have 2 of the 9.
All right, he's got 2 left.
The Bible. We have writings by people who sat directly under the teachings of the eyewitnesses themselves. So, for instance, Clement. He was ordained by Peter himself, and he wrote a letter to the church in Philippi in the very first century where he talked about the confidence the apostles have about Jesus being the Son of God because of the resurrection that they had been eyewitnesses to.
All right. No, we don't, Lee. No, we don't. So Clement,
the indignance.
Clement wrote. Well, so there's a letter that some think is attributable to Clement and some think was a later pseudepigraphal forgery. But it doesn't matter, because that letter, while it does talk about resurrection. That letter never says that Clement met Peter. There's Clement never, ever, ever says, I knew Peter, which is what Lee's claim is here. That Peter's buddy Clement, is a witness. That claim comes from Irenaeus in the 4th century. In the 4th century, someone said, yeah, Peter and Clement were friends. And Lee's taking that at its word. For some reason, it's not a tradition that comes even before that. You just got was it Eusebius or Irenaeus? I'm pretty sure it's Irenaeus. Let me just double check my mind.
What about Philippians 4:3?
Oh, well, there's a guy named Clement in Philippians.
Okay.
But people don't think that Paul actually wrote Philippians. and whether if Paul knew a guy named Clement, that would not prove that Peter knew a guy named Clement.
Right. Yeah. Okay. That makes sense.
And also, there might have been many people named Clement. There's no qualifier to say it's the same.
All right. So to be clear, because you know more about this, so in Philippians 4:3, let me share this for a sec. How do I share this on the screen? I gotta stop doing this first.
Yeah.
And then do this. Okay. Oh, my screen went off. Gosh darn it. Now I have to hit my stupid button again. And I'm not going to be able to make it bigger. 1 second. Can you see it?
I see it.
I have 2 screens and one of them shut down. Okay, there we go. I ask you, my true companion, help these women since they have... So women were preaching alongside you. Interesting. All of these things keep undermining Sean's argument later. In the cause of the gospel, along with Clement and the rest of my co-workers whose names are in the book of life. So this is Paul talking about how he knew Clement.
A guy named Clement, who we do not know is the same Clement that later became Pope.
Got ya. Okay. But how does that connect? So there's nothing.
But Lee said
was ordained by Peter.
Clement was ordained by Peter.
Okay.
The verse you pulled up would not help us determine that he was ordained by Peter. And that is not a notion that anyone seemed to have known about until the 4th century. But Lee just takes that on its word. Oh, yeah. But you'd think that if Clement, knew Peter, he would, in his own writings, would talk about it. But he doesn't.
Okay. So that's not going on the chart then. Because... If I'm doing the chain of custody or the chain of connection, the Kevin Bacon degrees of separation,
right? In
Philippians 4:3, which is like a contested letter of Paul. Like
actually, no idea. It's an undisputed. Yeah.
It's undisputed. Okay, so in Philippians 4:3, which is an undisputed letter of Paul.
Yep.
Paul says that he knows somebody named Clement, and he's asking somebody else to take care of him before he leaves and fucks off somewhere.
Also in First Clement, like the guy who later became Pope.
Yeah.
He also doesn't claim to know Paul either. So it's not like he doesn't ever make himself this person. He doesn't. That was me. Mentioned. I got a name drop in the.
Which you think
the letter there
would, yeah. But okay, so he doesn't ever claim to be this person, and this doesn't connect him. It wouldn't
connect him with Peter.
So what connects him to Peter is who?
A 4th century writer called, I believe it's Irenaeus. Let me just triple check. It's either Eusebius or Irenaeus. Clement
of Alexandria.
Anyway, it's 4th century.
Okay.
I think I'm right. Let's go.
What writer?
Oh, it's in the Apostolic No, I'm being too generous. I'm sorry. It is in a book called The Apostolic Constitutions in the 4th century, which has an unknown author. and that was a rule book for how to run your church services.
Can you share that so that I can see it?
Sure.
Or no?
I have to go to a different browser.
Yeah, that's fine.
Technology.
Okay.
So it's in the Apostolic Constitutions where it talks about Clement.
So, and that was written in the 4th century.
Yeah, and that's what says
hundreds
that
of years later, once this church is established.
Yeah, and what they wanted to do, of course, they really wanted to connect their papal succession, right? They wanted their papal
directly to
succession
Jesus,
to go directly back to Jesus. So that's why.
And since Peter is the rock on which the church is built, connecting Clement, who is the first pope, to Peter, creates a line of succession that's unbroken from Jesus.
Whether it was true or not, it makes that nice line of succession. So
okay, that makes sense.
Yeah. So I strongly disagree, Lee, and I actually his chain of custody stuff makes me think he was not a great reporter, but maybe he was a great reporter in other things. I don't know.
Okay. All right, back we go.
Jesus. And then Polycarp. Polycarp was appointed by John to be bishop at the church at Smyrna. And he wrote a letter in which he mentions the resurrection no fewer than 5 times.
Now, good question is, in the letter that Polycarp wrote, did he say that he knew John?
Does he?
Which is the claim Lee just made. No, Polycarp never mentions that he knew John. This would have been news to Polycarp. That was written, let me see. That was...
So Polycarp was writing this to whom? When? Smyrna? Polycarp?
Yeah. And so, this was Irenaeus. Sorry. This was the one. Irenaeus later said that Polycarp knew John. But Polycarp himself never makes this claim. Irenaeus, again, writing in the 4th century.
Okay. This is so convoluted. That's very confusing to me. So he's affirming that Polycarp knew John. So he's trying to place these people in the sphere of Jesus and like the early church.
He introduced this section by saying people who sat at the feet of the apostles are also writing us letters about how the resurrection is real.
Okay.
And it's like, no, these are 2nd century men who are writing about how the resurrection is real, but they themselves gave themselves no apostolic authority. If I was trying to write a letter about how resurrection was real, and I happen to know John the Apostle, I'm going to put that in there.
Yeah.
And same with Clement. If you happen to have known Peter and was trying to convince people of the resurrection, I feel like you're in a name drop. It's much like, if I'm trying to write a letter about something about Star Wars, you know who I'm going to name drop?
Yeah, George Lucas.
Yeah.
Because you had direct access to it. Yes. Yeah, especially because you would think that if you're writing like theological tenets that are specifically designed to give, the church structure and order and, marching orders or whatever, you think you would mention like your source for this specific theology if it was that close to. It's weird not to, and it's weird for no one to mention it until many like
centuries later. Yeah.
And then to hang your hat on that as though
as if
that
it's a
is
fact.
Definitive proof. Like I can see, like reasonably, devil's advocate again, how you can say like Eusebius or whatever wrote that they knew each other. Therefore, that's at least a piece of evidence that they may have.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't think that elevates to definitive.
Well, that's why Lee is he's operating with no nuance. I bet if Sean was saying the same thing, he would say, we have reports that
Right.
Peter knew
Like
Clement.
he wouldn't say
We
they
have
sat at
reports.
his feet or whatever.
So
Okay.
also fun Polycarp note is that in Bible college, that's what people called me, and I hated it.
They called you Polycarp. Oh, because your name is Paul.
Yeah.
Were you hoping they would call
they-
you Paul or
figured out-
Saul instead?
They figured out that I hated it, and then people did it because it.
That is what happens
Yep.
in your youth.
Indeed.
Okay, fair enough.
And says the apostles, where do they get their confidence? From the resurrection of Jesus, because they know that he returned from the dead. So that's 9 ancient sources inside and outside the New Testament, confirming and corroborating the conviction of the disciples that they encountered the risen Jesus. That is an avalanche of historical data.
Jay, you talk.
Okay, so just to summarize what I wrote down Paul passed on a creed, and Paul said he saw Jesus.
And then Paul told his friend that he saw Jesus.
Yeah, well, that's all just Paul saying he saw Jesus to a variety of people.
Yeah.
And Paul's the one who passed on the creed. So Paul's the source for the two that I would consider fairly legitimate.
Yeah. And then Matthew, Mark, and Luke.
Yeah, I mean...
This is why I introduced you for the Bible tells me so jingle way back in the day, because you're just saying Bible.
And the only sources outside the Bible that I heard him say were Polycarp and Clement.
Correct. Who in the 2nd century wrote letters that say that apostles believed in the resurrection. And it's like,
cool.
You know what? By then, no one's doubting that apostles believed in resurrection. Like that's not you're not affirming anything, right? At that point.
This was another waste of a chart because it's just got 2 things on it, both of them coming from Paul. Like the rest of them, I just like really can't see as definitive.
We're done with the portions that made me most angry. So now we're
now we're in the ones that made
now
me
we're
more
on to you
angry.
being angry.
Is it Wallace next? I think.
Maybe.
Talk about how you were trained in forensic statement analysis as part of your tools to be able to determine, who done it.
Right.
So how does that apply to the witness statements in the gospel about Jesus?
Well, so every word matters in forensic statement analysis, not just the.
Okay, for starters, what witness statements? Like they don't establish that. So like what are you considered like first you need to narrow down your criteria. So I don't actually know who he's talking about right now. Like he's just talking about a methodology, which I'll get into, but I don't know how he I feel like a step has been skipped in demonstrating that they're eyewitnesses, but I think the reason is that he wants to reverse engineer them into eyewitnesses by saying, I looked at what this said, and based on what this said, I can reasonably determine that this was written by somebody who was there firsthand. So he's not starting with verifying that the source itself was firsthand. He's starting...
He's doing
work backwards from the source to prove that it's an eyewitness.
Yeah, he's like, I know what eyewitness testimony sounds like. Will this sound like eyewitness testimony to me?
Yeah, okay. And now I'm going to get agitated, but all right.
The words you might say, but the words you could have said but chose not to. So I'm looking at options. So I'm always looking at the words that are optional words that don't need to be said. So for the most part, adjectives and adverbs are optional.
Adjectives and adverbs are... For the most part, adjectives and adverbs are optional is wild. Just as a statement. just as a statement. I just want people to set with that for a second.
Words. You never need to use them. So if I have a clicker for my computer and I tell you, okay, this is my grade.
What's a clicker for a computer?
Does he mean a mouse?
Like a TV remote control.
Do you mean a mouse, Jay?
Clicker. What am I really telling you? I'm telling you I have more than one clicker. Because why am I using the optional word gray?
Okay, so I paused it over.
Yeah.
But this started to annoy me because a lot of my background in psychology is about like communication theory and like impression formation and stuff. And he's leaving like massive bits out. He's saying that there's a qualifying word that adds detail, and that qualifying word is gray. So I'm saying I have a gray computer clicker, whatsoever that may be. And the fact that I utilize the word gray means that I have more than one, but that's not necessarily the case. Like that's like a way massive assumption. Like it depends on the context of what you're talking about. Like you can't just take that statement divorced from the overall context of what is being discussed. So if you look at the context of the entire statement, it could be the case that, you know, you're attempting to, as detailed as possible, like describe your environment or your surroundings. And therefore you use the word gray, not to indicate that you have more than one, but because in the context of that directive, like where somebody's saying like, describe all of your surroundings in as much detail as possible, you would utilize the word gray. It could be the case that you have more than one, but that's not necessarily the case. But he's acting as though that's indicative of it being necessarily the case without giving broader context. But intuitively, if you hear that, you're like, oh yeah, like if I say gray, that could indicate, like that could be indicative that of the fact that I have more than one and the other one's purple or white, and I want to differentiate them. But it would also mean that the person you're discussing is aware that you have two, and it's important for you to make a distinction about which computer clicker you're using in order to relay the information. Like there's way too much context that's being left out to support the underlying assumptions that he's making, but intuitively it can kind of make sense. Like, did that explanation make sense for why something like that frustrates me? Because intuitively,
I get it. I get it. I do. I mean, I also get why if you're an investigating officer, those are the kind of words that make your ears just pick up, so that you can cycle back and ask the question again and see if someone changed their statement or whatever. I mean, sure, but yes, no, he's jumping to conclusions, and in this context is deliberately trying to lend more confidence than he should have. So.
Also, liars tend to add a significant amount of erroneous detail because they tend to focus on the things that they know are true as an anchor towards the overall like statement or that they're attempting to convey to be perceived as true. So they can add additional erroneous details like, oh, I had my gray clicker because, you know, if you look at my living room, you'll see I have a gray clicker. So that's at least one aspect that is true that could give you a foundation to, you know, see truth in other statements that I'm making. Like it's not necessarily a great strategy, but it is a sort of innate psychological strategy, especially because it takes more cognitive effort to create falsities. If you focus on like the finite, like unnecessary, superfluous details about
but also if you're creating a literary work, which most people think acts as even if it's inspired by true events, you know, it's a biopic, it's not a biography, right? Verisimilitude is like obvious, like those are always things that you are trained as a writer to add, right? You're supposed to ground wherever you can ground something, you ground something.
Yeah.
So a gray clicker, if you're writing a novel, you might say gray clicker so that people can picture it in their head, right?
That's a good point that I actually didn't think of, is not even just verisimilitude, but the medium that's being analyzed here isn't verbal speech.
Correct.
It's being conveyed via a different medium. It's being conveyed by writing. And you utilize very different types of communication strategy when you're writing something versus saying it out loud. Just by virtue of the fact that you have much more time to think about it that.
And it's also back then it was very expensive. Parchment was expensive. You didn't just you sat there and you thought about your sentence. You didn't just
and especially if you have access to other sources, like you might utilize them in order to give additional support to what you're saying. But yeah, okay, cool. That good point, because I actually hadn't thought about that. I should have. Bad on me.
I don't need that word, Greg. I just say this is my clicker. You can see it's who knows how many I have, but this one's the gray one. So when you're examining the words that people use and how they compress time and extend time and how they use personal pronouns, how am I describing you? How are you describing me? That tells you something about the intent of whoever is talking. I just took that process and I applied it to the Gospels and looked for those words that would give away a perspective, perhaps, like, for example, in early history, there's a church father named Papias who says that Peter was preaching in Rome and that Mark was his scribe, was sitting at his feet listening to Peter's preaching, and from that he wrote the Gospel of Mark. Okay, so I said, if that's true, I should find Peter's fingerprints in the Gospel of Mark forensically. So that was one of the very first things I started.
Okay, he never goes on to explain this. He just says that he found Peter's fingerprints in the Gospel of Mark. So I looked it up, and then I took it down because I want to hear what you think about this specifically, because I don't know if I fully understand his evidence for this. Can you see? Oops. No, I don't want to subscribe to Cold Case Christianity. So this is actually J. Warner Wallace's website. It's Cold Case Christianity's website. And before we begin to look at some of the internal evidences for Peter's connection to Mark, blah, 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 and then it just goes on to say like similarities, yada, yada, yada. And then he goes into that Mark was essentially to Peter what Luke was to Paul, because every time Paul mentions Luke, he also mentions Mark. And I'm like, okay, well, what does that have to do with Peter? And then Mark
by all he means both things, but okay.
Yeah.
Anyway, carry on. I'm just laughing. There's not a big sample size, but okay.
So Mark and Luke clearly knew each other. I don't know how he gets there to knowing that's the same Mark. And that's consistent with Mark's opening statement in the gospel, or consistent with the opening statement in the Gospel of Luke. And the opening statement is that I'm going to, write you a clear and orderly account. But then, like, I don't get the rest of it. And then he goes to Papias, because Papias said Mark became Peter's interpreter. Mm-hmm. But when is Papias writing?
So we actually don't have any of Papias's firsthand works at all. All we have is later church fathers in the 2nd century who quote him most of the time to disagree with him. So we unfortunately don't have Papias's writings, but we do have quotes from him. And one of them is about Mark and Peter. What he says is that Mark wrote down everything that Peter had ever said. And one of the reasons why people are kind of like is that it doesn't very well describe the Book of Mark we have, because the Book of Mark we have is the shortest of all of them by a long shot. So surely that can't be everything that Peter remembered. But Papias is not in a position to know. This is it's a 2nd century person. But the other thing so in that same passage, Papias describes the book of Matthew, and he describes it as being written in Hebrew, and the book of Matthew was written in Greek, and that the book of Matthew was apparently just sayings of Jesus, and obviously Matthew is a narrative. So in general, it's kind of like, well, what is Papias? Is Papias even describing the documents that we are describing. Like maybe Papias had something in front of him that he believed was written by Mark and that he believed was written by Matthew, but they sure don't sound like our books. So like it's a stretch. It's a huge stretch.
Like his chain of logic doesn't make any sense to me. And he speaks about it with like such certainty. And that's confusing to me. Because even in this, his evidence is that Mark was traveling with Paul according to the book of Acts, which I've already railed on about how silly I think,
Yep.
Luke and Paul's excellent adventure is. Like it's just a silly book. And if this is true, Mark was a cousin of Barnabas and originally fell from favor with Paul when he failed to continue on an evangelistic journey with Paul and Barnabas as a young man. This caused the two older men to separate. Barnabas continued on with Mark and Paul continued on with Silas. So Mark fell out of favor with Paul and fragged off. So where does Mark get to Peter?
Nowhere described in the New Testament. That's why he has to rely on Papias, who, Papias famously told the story that Judas died by blowing up like a balloon and having pus coming out of his penis, and
Cool.
and carts couldn't get around him because he filled the whole street. And so Papias is not taken seriously by most people, but except in this one case, they really want him to attest to Mark being, associated with Peter.
Okay, so Mark was a Jewish person who was a convert who roamed around with Paul, and then Papias, who we have nothing from.
Yeah, we just have quotes.
We have
about
quotes
him
from Irenaeus.
Yeah.
Like much later.
Yeah.
Saying what Papias said, not what he actually said.
Correct. And oftentimes refuting him, not affirming him.
And so if he was writing exactly what Peter saw and experienced, I'm confused how he knew anything about the crucifixion.
Very good point. Or what happened at the tomb later.
Yeah, because Peter denied Jesus 3 times and fucked directly off. So if you're Mark and you buy into this, and Mark was with Paul, had a falling out with Paul, ran to Peter for some reason, decided to be his scribe, was somehow educated enough to not just be literate, but literate in 2 different languages, because the Gospels were written in Koine Greek, and wrote down just what Peter was saying, because that's what Papias said, is that he didn't want to forget anything. It wasn't an orderly account because he was just writing things down as they came out of Peter's mouth, so that they could be recorded for posterity, because he knew it was that important. After Peter denied Jesus the 3rd time and left, that should have been the end of that book. Peter wasn't there for anything else.
That's true.
He was gone. So how does the rest of it get written? That falls apart for me. Even
there's
with
a lot
the
of problems
connection
in
being
here.
tenuous. I don't know. Am I wrong on that? Like, am I way off?
No,
base?
you're 100% right. I'm biting my tongue to add more, to list more problems, but you're absolutely right.
Yeah, it just seems strange to me. Like, I don't know if I want to listen to any more of Jay. Can I
just look and see if I could try?
Because I want to listen to Sean. Can I find Sean on this?
You can scrub.
That's the only way, huh?
There's a little dot.
A little dot.
Well, when you put your cursor on the playhead. Do you want me to do it? I can do it if you want. You can jump ahead.
Yeah.
Oh, you're right. It doesn't
occur. All nations.
I want to find. Yes.
Is a little differently.
What evidence do we have today that gives us confidence that the resurrection is a historical fact?
So there's at least 20 to 21 arguments for the empty tomb that cumulatively make a powerful case. One of the most compelling is in regards to who discovered the empty tomb. Now, all four Gospels report that women discovered the empty tomb. We read that in our modern culture, and we don't think twice about it. But in that patriarchal culture, a woman was typically not educated the same way as a man. In fact, there's some ancient Jewish proverbs, not in the scriptures, that says, better the words of the law burnt than delivered to women. They were looked down upon. And so put yourself in the position of the gospel writers. If they're inventing a story of an empty tomb and they want to convince people that this is true, who are the least likely witnesses they would invent, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, to be persuasive? And the answer is they obviously wouldn't invent women. That would be counterproductive. So the reason they report women, the most likely reason, is Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John heard a story that they believe, and they're passing on what they think is true. So that's one reason that it's kind of called the criterion of embarrassment. That
we both paused it at the exact same time. So I have all kinds of new and interesting thoughts about this ever since I started rereading Acts, especially, and then like just the Philippians quote that we brought up, and then reading the letters to Corinth that I think undermine this apologetic. But I want to hear what you think before I start.
No, I think you should go first. I think you should go first.
Okay, so in Acts, I should have written down.
I mean, sure, if you want to gather your thoughts, if you want me to.
So in Acts, as I was reading through it, one thing that struck me, and in Corinthians, I can start with Corinthians. Some of the only actual names that are mentioned in full are women, which is odd to me. And women are said to be like preaching along and very important in the early church. So let me bring up 1 Corinthians. What he said about Chloe. Shoot. Here it is. One sec. I'll bring it up. It's 1 Corinthians 1:11 through 13. So let me share. So as I was reading through it, can you see?
I cannot, but I'll add it.
Can you please? Because it doesn't seem to be working for me. Oh, I have to remove the other one first. I'm killing it right now. So my brothers and sisters, someone from Chloe's household has informed me that there's quarrels among you. And I'm like, Chloe's household? Chloe is definitely a woman's name. And she has her own household. And Paul deemed her important enough and trusted her word enough. This is the thing for me, even more so than Acts. Like, this resonated with me. Because if you're saying that the gospel writers wouldn't have used women to find the tomb because that would be really embarrassing, it seems like in the early church, at least Paul was very much listening to women. And it also seemed that like Chloe has a household and she has informed me that there's quarrels among you. So that's why I'm writing this letter. So doesn't that seem to undermine the criteria of embarrassment? And if you look in Acts, I'm not going to be able to find all of them and I don't want to hold everybody up, but like go do your own homework, advocate for your own understanding. As you read through Acts, when they're talking about the converts at the end of each segment, they list, some Gentiles confirmed, several Jews confirmed, and this specific woman in multiple instances, like just generic group of, male Jews, generic group of male Gentiles, specific woman named by name in Acts, which wasn't written by Paul. So why are they revered enough in Acts and in the letter to the Corinthians that Paul and whoever wrote Acts both feel the need to call women out specifically by name when they're generalizing, when they're referring to men? Like, that seems indicative to me that there were definitely prominent women. And then there's this Philippians passage that we just looked at that I hadn't looked at yet, where they're saying, like, there's this group of women who've been preaching alongside me.
Mm-hmm.
Like, take care of them. Like, they're important.
Yep.
So those two seem disparate to me. Am I missing something? Like, what am I missing?
Oh, no, you're 100% correct. And in fact, oddly, we know about this this is one of our, as a couple, a beef we have with apologetics is that they don't care that when they advocate for position A, for argument A, that undermines, they have a different argument for position B when argument B, because they will also, in a separate stream, come on and tell us how inclusive of women and how great for women early Christianity was, right? Like that's all, they can do a whole sermon on how great it was for women.
Gestures wildly at screen.
Right, exactly, right? And so what people recognize about how religion spread at ancient times is that a lot of times this was, women converting women. That would like, because conversations at that point in time happened generally in the watering hole conversations. Would have been mostly women there. They went at a separate time than men. There was a lot of, but women are converting women, and households come to believe. Like, they talk, like Chloe's household, they talk about households. Anyone who studies early Christianity is like, yeah, women were doing a lot of converting. Was it embarrassing to them? No.
That's what I don't.
Like, it wasn't embarrassing to them that it was. I have a whole separate thought, but are we done? I was yes-anding your position there.
Yeah, well, you got to the thing that I was going to get to, which is, it seems as though one apologetic then undermines another, because like I just showed one of the Focus on the Family articles, and it's one of like myriad articles that are like, oh, skeptics say that the church isn't good to women, but here's a billion examples of how women were revered and very important in the early church. I'm like, oh, okay. Right. So
which is it? Yeah.
Cool. Like, neat. Good to know. But doesn't that, like, if you hold to that, is it not intellectually inconsistent to then say that it was very, very embarrassing for early believers to have to believe the testimony of women? You don't get to do both simultaneously, in my mind, and be intellectually consistent. But I think that's like you mentioned, it's a consistent problem with apologetics, is that everything is done piecemeal, and it's so compartmentalized that you feel as though you have like a hermeneutic or some sort of apologetic that will address one problem, but you don't realize that by accepting that to address the problem you're currently looking at, you're undermining a solution to another problem somewhere down the line because they contradict each other. Like, apologetics don't remain consistent across the line. And this is just like a blatant example of that in my mind. So I have nothing else to say.
All right.
We should wrap up relatively soon, and you have more things to say.
So Mark was a literary work, as we said.
Yeah.
And Mark as a literary work, few would dispute this, that the theme constantly is subversion of expectation. Last shall be first, constantly. The disciples have no idea what Jesus is saying, but a centurion does, or a Samaritan does. Like, it's constantly in the book of Mark. That's just a theme that those who should understand don't, and those who, normally would be looked down on are the ones who receive the revelation, are the ones who get it first. So Mark is the first place that anyone visits an empty tomb. And so it is absolutely 1,000,000% in line with the theme of the 15 chapters that came before. If he was to have prominent people who should have got it, like who knew this and knew this was coming, and who were well respected, that would have gone against everything that happened before. In Mark, it's constant. Anyway, go look again. Go advocate for your understanding. But Mark, if you read Mark only as itself and not when you try and harmonize it with the others, again, last shall be first. Subversion of expectation. Those who shouldn't understand get the message first. So even if you think that this was a position that women were of a lower position, that is fully in line with Mark's themes that, the women were given it first because the least were given it first. So there is that. There's also, Sean, I think I agree with what Sean said, that the writers of Matthew, Luke, and John were then saddled with this tradition that they could no longer break from, because Mark had already established women were in the tomb. But what you do see when you read Matthew, Luke, and John is they trying to subvert it. So they quickly have the men showing up as quickly as possible afterwards. So in Mark, right, the women don't even tell anyone. It's not like the women were embarrassing witnesses. At the end of Mark, they literally keep their mouths shut.
Yeah.
So no one came to believe because of them.
And
but
everyone found out.
In these other gospels, they keep adding on. Peter ran there immediately, or there was a gardener there. Like these other stories added men in there, not because it was, maybe because it was a true thing that happened, but equally likely in my view is that, no, they relied entirely on Mark, and Mark had already established this detail. So this is kind of canon, as it were, in the expectations of someone reading a new gospel. So that was a point that they couldn't depart from, because that was like well established in the oral tradition. Those are my thoughts on why this embarrassment criteria. There's more. J. Warner Wallace, actually, I know we skipped over him. He has whole videos about how he thinks the criterion of embarrassment is stupid, because in his mind, criminals self-deprecate themselves all the time.
Yes. Yep.
Because it makes their story sound more believable. So he's
and they want you to pity them. They want to emotionally manipulate. Yeah.
So he's like, that's not a criteria by which we tell truth. Like it's just not a thing.
It's so strange how the different camps kind of deviate in where they draw lines.
Yeah.
Tends to be, I guess, their own specific subject matter expertise. But
there's also historical things, right? We don't know what's embarrassing, right? So so it may well be that a character who a homosexual person, that might be an embarrassing detail in a story set in the 1970s,
right?
Less of an embarrassing detail set currently, depending on the situation. I'm not saying not, but less of.
I would argue that it was never embarrassing. You're talking about how people perceive it contextually based on the current culture.
But if you want to put, I guess if you want, or how open someone might be about that detail about themselves, for example, it's just that we in history, we're talking about 2,000 years, and I'm talking about here, attitudes change about certain things in decades now. So just criterion of embarrassment is not widely used in history, because you can't know what's embarrassing to a given group. Even one village versus another village, a certain detail might be embarrassing versus in another village. We don't know. It's just not a solid thing you can.
They base it on internal Bible stuff, right? Because the Bible says that. No,
Sean affirmed it. It's not even in the Bible. He's he affirmed it from outside the Bible stuff.
Oh, okay. So, but Jewish literature then about women.
Yeah, there's Jewish literature that says, women are hysterical and you can't believe what they say. Okay.
But it just seems inconsistent to me.
It is.
And it's
not
frustrating.
A good argument. Yep.
All right. Well, I think that is an organic stop. I know we're never going to be able to watch this entire thing. I would like people to go look into everything that we said and tell us why we're right and why we're wrong in the comments sections down below on either channel. This is both on Apologia Live and on Shannon Q simultaneously through the magic of the intron webs. And let us know what you think. This is a format that we are starting to work with, and everything is fluid, and we want to provide something that people both enjoy and is valuable. And Paul primarily wants to encourage me to be a content creator.
I think we all do.
Well, we'll see. I like something like this where we can actually just have conversations about what we're looking at. I dislike being like assertive with my position is the accurate position, and I always post my sources, and it's always been like a primary goal of this channel for people to elevate the discourse, advocate for your own understanding, be better, not the same. Like those were always my three like pillars that I wanted to adhere to, and I really want to do something that's in line with that. And I think that there's a gap in this space where people see what it looks like just to have questions and to work through it and sit in a space that's maybe moderately uncomfortable because you don't immediately have the answers. And it's something that you do need to examine and look into further, and to show, kind of a small snippet of what that looks like and how these questions arise and where we go when they do. I do want to incorporate the Bible a little more into it. Now that I'm reading it again, it's so funny what does and doesn't stay with you. Like, it's been so long since I read it cover to cover that like a bunch of it just, especially in the New Testament, just really didn't stick with me the way that it does now. And it's so different reading it now when I'm reading it end to end, because of the things that I do know and because of the way that I ask questions now. Things stand out to me more. So I like this exercise just in general, because it is showing me or revealing to me into like a degree of intellectual growth. Like I'm no longer taking things on authority. And I'm asking better questions and then pursuing the answers to those questions, not with a goal of affirmation, but with a goal of finding out how I can know something. And it's a fruitful endeavor. I'm enjoying the exercise. Hopefully you are as well, although you live in this space vastly more than I do.
I'm excited. We won't always do history. I'm sure we will touch on neurology and psychology and rhetorical strategy and all kinds of things. So suggest videos if there's not too long a video. If
20 minutes or less, I think, or a section of a video that's 20 minutes or less. I've been trying to find a JP Moreland one because I know you want to listen to me go off about the soul and C fibers and stuff, which we very much can do. But all of his videos are just droning, and he doesn't get to the point. Nothing is succinct. Anywho, post what you learned down below, where you found the information, anything that you can add to what we discussed so that we can all help to teach each other and elevate the discourse.
Later.
I'm Paulogia. Until next